Welcome to Keeping an Eye on the Geopolitical Ball. This is my weekly commentary as Jamie Shea, the Senior Fellow of Friends of Europe, speaking to you today from a very rainy Brussels. And today's topic is also a topic which is not a sunny one, particularly not for the NATO alliance, which is the announcement by a senior US official last Friday that President Trump has decided to withdraw 9,500 US troops from Germany. This is about one quarter of the 34,000 odd US soldiers that remain stationed permanently in Europe today, mostly in Germany and in Italy. So this would be, if it is carried out, quite a sizable reduction in the US presence. As you can imagine, this has caused some consternation among US allies. For example, what exactly is the US plan? We still don't know. It's been given apparently to the Pentagon to implement the details, and there's been some talk that not all of these US forces would actually leave Europe, and some might be sent to Poland instead. If all of the 9,500 were sent to Poland, maybe this wouldn't be such a bad outcome for NATO, because obviously it's in the Baltic states and Poland today where NATO's collective defense posture vis-a-vis Russia is being organized, rather than in Germany, of course, where it was very much in the divided Germany during the Cold War. But if all of these 9,000 plus troops are being sent back to the United States, this would give NATO a headache, because it would mean that NATO would have to plan for even more US reinforcement troops, and all of the airlift and the shipping and the pre-positioned equipment that goes along with that to bring back to Europe in a crisis. It was much better for Europe to have a sizable US presence permanently stationed on the continent for two reasons. Number one, simply for political deterrence, the reassuring embrace of the United States still being committed to NATO. More practically, these 34,000 troops as part of EUCOM, the US European Command, were able to organize planning, exercise, training activities. Now, it's true that since the Russia annexed Crimea back in March 2014, and NATO had to resurrect its collective defense activities, the US has chosen not so much a permanent stationing strategy, but rather a rotational strategy to frequently bring US brigades back to Poland every 6 months for training with NATO forces. And the US, of course, has organized and participated in large-scale exercises to ensure that it has those reinforcement capacities. For example, Trident Juncture, a big exercise in Norway 2 years ago, and this year Defender Europe, although that had to be curtailed because of the COVID-19 crisis. But still, even if the United States has gone for a rotational strategy, this US decision, if it's implemented, is not going to make NATO's life easier. For one thing, in the past, US force reductions were tied very much to reciprocal moves by Russia through arms control negotiations, like mutual balanced force reductions in the 1970s, or the CFE treaty in the 1990s, or to a more relaxed détente in European security, such as we enjoyed for 30 years almost after the Berlin Wall fell in 1989. But this time there is no relaxation in the Russian posture. Indeed, Russia last Friday, while the US was announcing its troop cuts, actually increased its presence in the Western Military District with a new permanently deployed so-called Sevastopol battalion. Russia last week announced 6 new ships joining its Baltic fleet. It's been also during the COVID crisis carrying out some rather aggressive exercises on the borders of NATO and flying its aircraft very close to NATO airspace. And if Russia sees this as a reduced US commitment to European defense, it will be a good day for President Putin and a very bad day for NATO. So as we await for details, inevitably some debates will arise in Europe. One is this the time to push even harder for European strategic autonomy and Europe standing on its own feet, such as President Macron has recently calling for? But of course, for NATO, it begs the question, or Europe, to what extent it's willing or unable to spend the money and create the forces that will compensate for for those departing US troops. The second thing, of course, is that at a time when NATO is on the cusp of receiving new American nuclear weapons in Europe as part of the modernization, it's not going to make that easier for NATO officials to sell the argument for nuclear burden sharing, particularly in countries like Germany, if at the same time the US is reducing its forces. Now, will this decision be implemented? We still don't know. We've seen in recent days the Pentagon push back against instructions from the White House to use US military troops, for example, on the streets of Washington. And NATO has many friends in the US Congress, including in the Republican Party, who also might challenge this decision. So let's wait and see if it really does happen. But nonetheless, at a time when NATO has done so much in recent years to improve burden sharing, to spend more on defense, and to increase its capabilities for collective defense, based around that essential US commitment, this doesn't really seem, this decision to reduce US forces, to make any strategic sense. And let's therefore hope that good sense will prevail and that decision will be reversed or will never be implemented at all. Thank you very much for watching and listening. Look forward to for you to join me, hopefully, for another commentary this time next week. Goodbye for now.